She escaped her husband's abuse, but he returned armed with a gun. Amanda and James Coley resided on the picturesque South Bellagio Drive, a quiet cul-de-sac in St. Augustine, Florida. Together, they raised a son and a daughter, embodying what many considered the quintessential American dream. Amanda, known for her confidence and vivacity, was the life of any gathering. She was constantly surrounded by friends and possessed a charisma that made her the center of attention. James was equally sociable and well-liked, actively participating in coaching his children's sports teams, earning a reputation as a dedicated father. Despite outward appearances, their marriage began showing signs of distress. James harbored a jealous streak that clashed with Amanda's outgoing personality. His insecurity was exacerbated by her natural ability to charm and draw people in. This tension escalated as James started to consume alcohol excessively, worsening his jealous impulses and leading to frequent verbal confrontations with Amanda. He blamed her for their marital issues, often in an abusive tone. Committed to the idea that children should grow up with both parents, Amanda tried to salvage their deteriorating relationship. However, James's controlling behavior intensified. He monitored Amanda's every move, restricted her interactions, and doubted her loyalty relentlessly. Despite her attempts to keep the family unit intact, his aggression and intimidation tactics grew, severely impacting the emotional health of their children. The ongoing conflict and fear created an untenable atmosphere for Amanda and the kids. After much deliberation, she decided to end the marriage, recognizing that staying was harmful to both her and her children's welfare. This difficult decision marked a pivotal step towards seeking a healthier environment for her family. Leaving was a heart-wrenching decision, but Amanda was resolute that it was the right one for the safety and well-being of her children. Upon hearing her decision, James was crushed, unable to accept losing her. Despite his emotional turmoil, Amanda remained firm, driven by the need to establish a secure environment for her son and daughter. After the split, James vacated their shared home on South Bellagio Drive. However, he frequently visited, and during some of these visits, he and Amanda were intimate. Amanda later claimed that these encounters were under duress. She complied to prevent James from becoming violent. As Amanda sought to move on, she cautiously began a relationship with Lamar Doberly, keeping it hidden from James to avoid provoking his jealousy. James's inability to let go led to a terrifying escalation. One weekend, while Amanda was away, he broke into her house in a jealous fury and burned all her clothes in the backyard, an act that marked a turning point for Amanda. Shaken by his actions, she filed for divorce and obtained a court injunction mandating James to keep his distance. The injunction specifically noted her fears that James would harm her if he discovered her new relationship. Meanwhile, James's obsession deepened. He enlisted the help of their neighbors on South Bellagio Drive, urging them to watch Amanda and report any unusual activity, especially the presence of unfamiliar men around her home. In August 2015, this network of surveillance bore fruit for James when neighbor Mike Dickens sent him a text with a screenshot of a shirtless man mowing Amanda's lawn. This image triggered a violent outburst from James. He confronted Amanda, demanding the identity of the shirtless man, convinced that he was more than just a lawn service worker. Despite Amanda's assurances that the man was simply hired help, James refused to believe her. His suspicions spiraled into continued harassment, bombarding Amanda with accusatory and threatening text messages, each one intensifying the fear and tension between them. James turned to Mike Dickens for more than just surveillance. He sought emotional backing. In his text to Mike, James labeled Amanda as malevolent, unfaithful, and the worst person imaginable, vowing that she would pay for her supposed betrayals. Driven by his fury, James made a pre-dawn trip to Amanda's residence on South Bellagio Drive at 4:41 a.m. on August 27th. However, Amanda wasn't home. Angered by her absence, James forced his way inside. Once in, he unleashed his rage, smashing televisions, demolishing furniture, and tearing apart the decor. His rampage led him to Amanda's bedroom, where he found men's clothing and adult toys, items that fueled his fury as they were not his. Overwhelmed by jealousy, James began bombarding Amanda with calls, each more incendiary than the last. At 8:34 a.m., he left a venomous voicemail on her phone, filled with revulsion and bitter accusations. Shortly after, he made his way to the St. Johns County Courthouse to face the consequences of violating the injunction Amanda had secured against him for previous misconduct. In court, James admitted guilt by pleading no contest to the injunction violation. Unaware of his earlier destructive outburst at Amanda's home, The judge considered his clean criminal record and opted for rehabilitation over incarceration. James was mandated to enroll in anger management courses and was placed on a year of unsupervised probation. Dressed in his work attire, James seemingly acquiesced to the judge's decision at the courthouse. Yet, before leaving, he made another call to Amanda, this time leaving a voice message that contrasted sharply with his earlier anger. He pleaded for her to return his calls, affectionately calling her baby and expressing a desperate wish to reconcile. Amanda finally picked up James's call, resulting in a 14-minute conversation whose details remain a mystery, but clearly influenced James profoundly. Instead of heading to his job, he altered his course, stopping at a gas station where he filled his car and bought several cans of beer. By 10:11 a.m., James was en route to South Bellagio Drive, where Amanda resided. At home, Amanda was met with a scene of destruction and deep emotional upheaval caused by James. Distressed and seeking comfort, she turned to her boyfriend, Lamar, and her friends, Lindy Robbins and Rachel Hendricks, who quickly came over to support her. Overwhelmed by the situation, Amanda contacted the sheriff's department for help, but ultimately chose not to press charges against James, hoping to spare him a jail sentence for the sake of their children. The officers left after Amanda declined further assistance. However, James was closer than Amanda realized. He had already arrived near her home, parking his vehicle discreetly before approaching the house. Inside, Amanda, Lamar, Lindy, and Rachel were trying to calm their nerves in the living room kitchen area when James, overcome with fury, began shooting at the house while yelling, "Where is he?" Lamar's quick thinking got him out of immediate danger, his frantic escape captured by the home's security cameras. Amanda, Lindy, and Rachel were thrown into turmoil as bullets shattered the tranquility of the setting. They eventually found sanctuary in Amanda's bedroom, barricading themselves in the master bathroom. From their hideout, Amanda made a desperate call to 911. The situation escalated to a terrifying climax when they heard James's menacing voice outside the bathroom door demanding entry. The fear was palpable as they awaited help, hoping for a resolution to the harrowing ordeal. In a desperate attempt to halt the violence, Amanda pleaded with James to stop, acutely aware that revealing Lamar's whereabouts could endanger his life. The tense situation rapidly worsened as the 911 dispatcher heard a volley of gunshots and Amanda's screams. Tragically, the call ended abruptly with Amanda's cries for help ceasing suddenly. James, driven by his uncontrollable rage, barged into the bathroom and fatally shot Amanda. His rampage continued as he turned towards the closet where Lindy and Rachel were hiding. Lindy, crouched and speaking with 911, and Rachel, positioned in the corner, braced for the worst. James blasted the closet door open, and in a heart-stopping moment, Rachel dodged behind the door as James entered. Amidst Lindy's terrified cries, James aimed his gun at her head and fired, ending her life instantly. In the chaos, Rachel managed to escape from Amanda's house and found sanctuary at a neighbor's home where she concealed herself in a closet and urgently called 911, terrified that James would track her down. The police arrived swiftly, initiating a meticulous investigation to unravel the sequence of events that culminated in the tragedy. Complicating the investigation, James had fled the scene. Later, in a moment of despair, he called his father, confessing his inability to cope with the escalating pressures. He claimed that Amanda's efforts to incarcerate him had left him with no alternatives but to act drastically. Expressing regret, James recounted his failed attempts to resolve the conflict peacefully before fleeing further. He stopped at his sister's house to gather some belongings and then drove north. The manhunt for James concluded swiftly when he was apprehended in Virginia less than a day later. His arrest followed a tip-off from a woman who reported a suspicious vehicle with Florida license plates that had been driving erratically, even trying to force her off the road. While traveling with 3 small children, a woman became increasingly alarmed for her safety, prompting a police response. An officer initiated a traffic stop, and James was arrested without resistance. Although he was found to be intoxicated at a police station in Virginia, Detective Samantha English from Florida was ready to interrogate James about the murders of Amanda and Lindy. Despite the detective's lengthy 10-hour drive to conduct the interview, James immediately requested an attorney, halting any further questioning. Given the brutal nature of the murders, the prosecution was contemplating the death penalty for James, asserting that the killings were premeditated, which required proving his intent beyond a reasonable doubt. Premeditation in murder charges involves demonstrating that the perpetrator planned the killing before it occurred. The prosecution's challenge was to show that James had not only intended to kill Amanda and Lindy, but had also meticulously planned these actions and consciously ignored chances to reconsider. They needed to compile robust evidence to affirm that James's actions were calculated and deliberate. During his time at Duffield Regional Jail awaiting his trial, James stayed in touch with his family through phone calls, which were recorded by the authorities. These recordings provided critical insights into his mindset and further exposed his manipulative nature. In these conversations, James discussed his intentions to isolate his children from Amanda's family, indicating a continued desire to control aspects of his children's lives despite his incarceration. Furthermore, the recorded calls revealed James's confidence in receiving a lesser conviction of manslaughter, discussing the possibility of being released within 2 decades despite facing murder charges. His remarks suggested a strategic approach to his defense, hoping to mitigate the severity of his sentence. Meanwhile, a fellow inmate at Duffield Regional Jail approached the prosecution to offer additional information about James, potentially influencing the case further. Andrew Cherry, an inmate alongside James at Duffield Regional Jail, provided damning testimony. He recounted conversations with James where he expressed that Amanda and Lindy had deserved their fate. Andrew described James as bitter, frequently uttering harsh and vindictive remarks about Amanda. James faulted Amanda for their marital breakdown and felt vindicated by her death, painting a picture of a man driven by deep-seated revenge rather than mere spur-of-the-moment violence. This testimony gave the prosecution significant insights into James's motive, suggesting that the murders were premeditated acts of revenge. James harbored intense resentment towards Amanda, viewing the murders as a punitive measure for the grievances he believed she caused. During the summer of 2018, the trial of James Cawley commenced. On the first day, James made a startling statement to the court, acknowledging the defense strategy crafted to save his life, but also recognizing that it implied he was responsible for using a firearm that led to 2 deaths. This admission underscored the gravity of his situation and his understanding of the charges against him. James's defense team, during their opening statements, aimed to shift the focus from blame to understanding the circumstances that led to the tragic event. They posited that James, a man who professed deep love for his family, was not inherently capable of such violence without significant provocation or impairment. Highlighting James's state during the incident, the defense argued that he was under the influence of Ambien, a fact they urged the jury to weigh as a mitigating factor. They contended that the shooting wasn't a case of premeditated first-degree murder, but rather an act of diminished responsibility due to his intoxicated state, which impaired his judgment and control over his actions. The trial then moved to witness testimonies, beginning with Rachel Hendricks, who had directly experienced James's violent outburst. She detailed the terror of that night, followed by Lamar Doberly, Amanda's boyfriend, who also took the stand to provide his firsthand account of the events and the impact on their lives. During his testimony, Lamar Doberly expressed his conviction that he was James's target, leading him to flee Amanda's house as soon as the gunfire erupted. During cross-examination, the defense attorney challenged Lamar, questioning him about a purported clandestine relationship between James and Amanda. Lamar denied any knowledge of such a relationship. The defense's line of questioning then controversially shifted towards the topic of Amanda's adult toys, a move that outraged the prosecution and was perceived as an attempt to tarnish Amanda's reputation by depicting her as promiscuous. This aspect of the defense strategy sparked a public outcry, with many accusing the defense attorney of victim blaming. The backlash was swift and severe on social media, where people vehemently criticized the attorney's approach. In a subsequent interview, the defense attorney defended his tactics, insisting that his goal was not to shame Amanda, but to save his client by thoroughly examining all aspects of her personal life, which he deemed necessary for a complete understanding of the case. However, the public remained polarized, with many questioning the ethics and motives behind the defense attorney's tactics. As the prosecution rested their case, the defense began strategizing for their presentation in court. A crucial decision was whether James should testify. The defense team weighed the potential benefits of James humanizing himself to the jury against the risks of exposing him to a rigorous cross-examination that could highlight inconsistencies and potentially reinforce his guilt. After careful consideration, the defense chose not to have James testify, concluding that the risks did not justify the potential benefits. This decision meant forgoing the opportunity to present their narrative directly through James, a calculated risk the defense felt necessary to avoid potential pitfalls. Instead, the defense called James's sister Rhonda to the stand. Rhonda's emotional testimony aimed to illustrate James's efforts to salvage his failing marriage, while Amanda was already pursuing a divorce. Her testimony was pivotal to the defense's strategy, attempting to shift some of the narrative focus away from James's actions and onto the complexities of his relationship with Amanda. Rhonda testified about her role as a mediator, trying to bridge the communication gap between James and Amanda in hopes of resolving their marital issues. This was part of the defense's effort to depict a less malicious side of James, highlighting attempts at reconciliation. In their closing arguments, the defense portrayed the murders of Amanda Cawley and Linda Dobbins as the result of an emotional breakdown rather than a planned act, advocating for a conviction of second-degree murder. They suggested that James had snapped under extreme emotional distress, leading to temporary insanity, thereby committing the acts in a moment of uncontrollable impulse. Conversely, the prosecution presented a starkly different view in their closing. The courtroom watched intently as CCTV footage was presented, showing James acting normally with no apparent signs of intoxication or impairment. This visual evidence challenged the defense's argument that James was under the influence at the time of the murder. Adding to the evidence against the defense's claim, the judge who interacted with James on the morning of his court appearance testified. He confirmed that James seemed lucid and composed, showing no signs of being under the influence, which contradicted the defense's narrative of impairment. Crystal, James's sister, testified next, offering a different perspective of him. She described James as a loving and caring father, showcasing photographs of him with his children during happier times, highlighting the joy and warmth they shared. This was part of the defense's strategy to humanize James and emphasize his role as a devoted father to soften his image to the jury. In their closing arguments, the defense attorneys stressed that sentencing James to life without parole would essentially equate to a death sentence, as he would never be free again. They reminded the jury that Florida law requires unanimous agreement among all 12 jurors to impose the death penalty, hinting at the possibility of a lesser sentence if even one juror dissented. Despite the defense's efforts, the jury was unmoved by the attempts to mitigate James's actions. They concluded that the gravity of his crimes warranted the maximum punishment. The jurors unanimously recommended the death penalty, a decision later upheld by the judge. As the verdict was read, emotional relief mixed with profound sadness filled the courtroom. Amanda's family and Linda's loved ones wept, feeling a sense of justice yet overshadowed by their significant loss. Meanwhile, James's supporters sat in stunned silence, struggling to reconcile the outcome. As he was led away by the bailiffs, James gave a small smile and winked at his supporters, a gesture that seemed incongruent with the gravity of the moment. This act was his final public display before beginning his sentence. The tragic story of Amanda and Lindy's murder underscores the harsh realities of domestic violence. It serves as a cautionary tale, urging those in similar situations to seek help and not underestimate the dangers of such relationships. Amanda's family hopes that her story will raise awareness about the severity of domestic violence and inspire others to take proactive steps towards safety. They stress the importance of recognizing any signs of aggression in relationships, regardless of the duration or perceived stability. By sharing Amanda's story and advocating for change, there is hope to prevent future tragedies and ensure that no one else has to endure the pain of losing a loved one to domestic violence. The community and advocates are encouraged to break the silence surrounding domestic abuse and actively support those in need.